Sometimes the worlds collide and two people not only find each other, but also speak the same language. The language that Charles Roche and Eleanor Holcroft speak is cocktail creation. I'm Susan Schwartz, your drinking companion, and this is Lush Life Podcast. Every week we are inspired to live life one cocktail at a time by the best in the industry. Did you know you can really support us by purchasing Lush Life t-shirts for the whole family? Check out all our merch at alushlifemanual.com/merch. And now back to Charles and Eleanor, who from the depths of their underground kitchen have concocted Jam Doughnut Negronis, chicken dumpling martinis, and cookie dough old fashions, and that's just the beginning. Their bar consultancy company, Liquid Intellect, has created cocktails and menus for brands and bars all over the world. Today, they're here with me to reveal how they learned to speak cocktail.
So I was born just outside of Birmingham. So I've lived in like Tamworth for pretty much my whole life before moving to London.
All right, and tell me a little bit about your childhood.
So my mum and dad have always been involved in the hospitality industry. So it's been a really natural progression for me to just, I guess, kind of be involved with that as well. So my dad used to own like a pub and then a restaurant and a bar. So it was kind of, I was always grown up with going to the pub after school and waiting around there, and I remember pulling a pint at like 6 years old. It's not...
What kind of restaurant was it?
So the first place he opened was like a real country pub. So I remember it was like still in the days where people could smoke in pubs. There was loads of dogs in there. It was like a proper old man's cozy little place. And then he went on to open an Italian restaurant, and then a more like kind of gastropubby cocktail bar.
Was he the chef as well?
No, so he's never ever worked in the restaurant a day in his life. He's there every day just overseeing it, but he's very much a business owner, not a hospitality worker. So
he let you play behind the bar?
Yeah, he probably shouldn't have, but yeah, I always remember kind of going there after school, and I was always really actually interested in more the food side of it. So I remember like spending a lot of my childhood in the kitchen at the Italian restaurant and kind of pestering the chefs, and then I started working there when I was a teenager, and I would always be like hovering around them trying to like try the food. And yeah, I kind of always thought I would progress more into the food side. And then I think as I got older, I just naturally, I suppose, got into drinking and trying cocktails, and I just found that was where I was more comfortable.
Why, or what was it about the kitchen and the food that interested you?
I've always been really interested in cooking. I think it was, especially like back, I think like 15 years ago, I think chefs always felt like, for me as a child, it always seemed that chefs were like far more creative. And I guess in the Midlands, where with bars I was only exposed to kind of like pubs and like wine drinkers and maybe the basic gin and tonics, but there was never really like a massive creative process behind drinks. I didn't really feel then, so it was just exciting seeing they would always like come to my dad with a different like dish every day, and they would change the specials, and I would always be like trying them. And yeah, I remember always just being really excited by it.
So I guess that was your first introduction to flavor.
Yeah, I think it was. Like, my mum's always been a really good cook, and I always remember as a child cooking alongside her. But then, yeah, I think I started to experience flavour more, especially with Italian cooking. It's something I'm still really, really passionate about now. But yeah, the flavours of Italian food.
And so then you said that as you got older, you started to enjoy the drinking side of it.
Yeah, so I went to sixth form, like I did my A-levels, and I just never really had a big drive to go to university. I think I was always really unsure of what I wanted to do. And I saw kind of this hospitality industry, and at the time I was finishing my A-levels. My dad brought a like gastropub kind of cocktail bar place not far from where I was living, and I just kind of I thought about working there, and I wasn't really too sure whether like working for your dad was the right thing to do, but I kind of fell into working there and loved it, and just grew a passion for that industry from there, I think. And
what were you doing first there?
So first I was just going to be a waitressing because I'd never worked in a bar. I didn't know what I was doing behind the bar. And I remember the two bar managers there at the time were like getting me involved in like the trainings and stuff like that, and just helping out. I was like really involved from day one of the project, from it being built and stuff. So it was really nice to see it grow, and I think I was just really excited about it opening. And then they gave me a few shifts on the bar, and I just started working on the bar pretty much straight away then.
What kind of drinks were they making at the bar?
So for the area it was in, I guess it was quite a new thing for the area. Like it was a really old pub before, and so there was a kind of weird transition of getting people in the area used to there being a new cocktail bar there, and there being like quite a craft offering of what we did. But it would be like your classic cocktails, like they were pretty basic for the Midlands, but it gave me a good ground knowledge and gave me the excitement to like play around with like a couple of infusions and homemade ingredients. And
so you're doing homemade stuff there?
Yeah, we were doing little bits and bobs, more just kind of out of like learning and getting a little bit creative. And
did you think, wait, this is cooking? I'm using my cooking.
I would see it in kind of a cooking way, like just like you say, like making like jams or infusions and stuff like that. It would be kind of using the cooking behind it. Like in the afternoons, if it was quiet, like I'd sometimes pop into the kitchen and get the chefs to help me make something. I found it really exciting doing stuff like that.
All right, now you, Charles. Where did you grow up?
So I was born over in West London, but when I was quite young, my parents split up and me and my mum moved to the Midlands to just be closer to family. And then just by natural progression, I guess, I went to university in Leicester to be close to my family, trained to be an architect, and whilst I was there, kind of using hospitality as a bit of extra money, and just fell in love with making drinks. But before that, I was working in pubs and nightclubs in my like hometown.
And that was pre-university?
That was pre-university, yeah.
So you'd already gotten used to the whole bar scene before you even went to university?
I guess my first hospitality experience was like 15, and I was working in an Italian restaurant. And the chef was just a crazy person. He like used to throw knives, he would shout at you. And I remember one of the owners she was very old. She was the mother of the chef. And she was this tiny little Italian lady, like couldn't have been more than like 5 foot, like really, really short. And she was like so feisty, and she just used to walk around the restaurant. And if you were doing anything wrong, she would just be on you straight away. Were
you like, I am getting out of the kitchen and behind the bar?
Yeah, well, at this point, I was only 15, so I wasn't allowed to make alcoholic drinks. And I remember I went into the kitchen to pick up some plates. She had gone in before me. She picked up these plates from the hot plate and went into the restaurant. I came over, picked up these plates, and they were really hot, and I dropped them, and the food smashed on the floor.
Oh boy, that was your last day?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what ended my hospitality
was your last day?
Yeah. So the chef went crazy at me. I left, and I kind of said goodbye to hospitality for a little while, and I went and worked in a garden centre.
You're like, it's not very hospitable, this hospitality.
Exactly, yeah. And I think I was just like really overwhelmed by it all. Like I thought it would be really easy as a 15-year-old, kind of just looking for some extra pocket money. And
you thought plants can't talk back, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I was kind of just like really overwhelmed by just how much to service there was, and how, just the smallest little things would make a difference, and how frustrated the owners would get at my novice kind of outlook on hospitality. So once I'd kind of been working in a garden centre for a little while, my mum got me a job at a pub, the pub where her and my stepdad met. So it was quite a bit of a legacy, that pub, I guess. And when I started working there, it was kind of just pulling pints for locals, and I was still actually underage at this point. I was 17, so I was getting paid like cash for a few hours work on a Friday and Saturday. And I just kind of got to know the locals, and like it was really like it was just an eye-opening experience. It was just like something that I'd never really experienced, and I could get to know people, and you know, I would pour their pint as they were walking through the door because I knew what they would order, and it was just a really nice environment. And that pub actually owned a club in the city. So just before I turned 18, they said, it was one Friday night, they offered me taxi fare and some extra money to go and work at the nightclub because they were short-staffed one night. And I went and worked there, and I just had the most fun. Mm-hmm. And I was just drinking on shift. I was...
Not that you're promoting drinking on shift.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right, yeah. But, you know, it was just a whole different world. I was exposed to... I met so many people that night that then went on to become really good friends with. The staff there were really good fun and just really amazing. We all went from McDonald's after work, and it was just like a community that I'd never really been a part of before. And I think that was why I fell in love, because you were under so much pressure and it was so busy that you were just forced to create bonds with team members that you wouldn't necessarily form in a garden centre, for example. Mm-hmm. And it was just a really, really interesting working environment, and I just loved it.
But at that time, were you thinking, oh, well, this is fun, but I'm actually going to be an architect?
Exactly, yeah. So, like, my parents had always been quite fond of the idea of me going on and furthering my education. And I think because my stepdad and my mum hadn't done that, my mum had had me very, very young. My stepdad, he was in farming and like hands-on kind of groundworks, that sort of thing. So I think like he was like a 45-year-old man with back problems, and you know, his knees were going, and he said he just wanted something better for me. He wanted me to go on and do something that, you know, I can actually make a career out of and make some money and enjoy my life a little bit. So they were always quite like fond of me going to university and like pushing myself. And I was reasonably academic at school. I did well in my grades and stuff. So, you know, I remember I sat in a careers meeting when I was 18, and I answered the questions, and the guy said, "Yeah, I think you should be an architect." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll do that then."
I didn't realise that's what happened.
Yeah, it was kind of just like, you know, I always had a passion for art. I was really good at art. Mm-hmm.
So you already had that sensibility.
Yeah, I was really good at drawing and making models. I loved making like 3-dimensional like models of stuff. Lego, one of the big inspirations in my childhood, actually. But yeah, I guess I just always felt very creative, and I found the science of like physics very interesting as well, and chemistry. Biology I couldn't care less about. I felt so bored by it all, which is ironic because that's probably one of the things we use the most of now, alongside chemistry, of course. But so yeah, that's just how I progressed into architecture. And I went and studied in Leicester, and again I picked up a job in an Irish pub when I first got there, which was just awful. People having fights every day, and
oh boy,
yeah, throwing pint glasses over the bar. It was literally gross. So I was working there on one St. Patrick's Day, and it was really busy, and one of the bar managers of a bar in Leicester that I'd sort of cut my teeth in, he came in and said, "If you can be this happy and this upbeat on literally the worst, busiest day of the year, like come work for me." So I went and had an interview with him. He asked me how I made a mojito, and the only experience I'd ever had with cocktails was using the Funkin pouches, the pre-mixed pouches. And I said, "Well, you pour it out of the pouch."
Oh, I love it.
And he hired me, which was quite cool.
Did you say you add rum to the pouch?
No, I just said
you just use the pouch.
Yeah, you pour the pouch, yeah. So that was kind of my only experience with mojitos. It was just pouring.
He really trusted you.
Yeah. I think I was just, I was obviously a lot younger, obviously a lot fitter, and just quite charismatic, I think, when I was 18. So he just hired me on the basis of me being like a bit of a lad, I think. And I started working there, and within a few months I was you know, taking the most money on a Friday and Saturday night. I was like super fast. I was just super keen and eager to learn. And the bar manager on my first day, he'd bought me a little notebook, and I still remember he said to me, every shift he wants me to come in with notes on a classic cocktail, like research and my interpretation of said classic. So my first one was daiquiri, and I'd done all these pages of research on Jennings Cox and all of the kind of history behind the daiquiri and all this stuff. And I was just super excited, and I came in and I said, look, I've done all this research, like I've got my own recipe that I've spent like all night thinking about and developing. And he said, what is it? I said, so it's rum, strawberry liqueur, lime juice and sugar. And he was like, sounds delicious, but you know, it's a strawberry daiquiri. So I made it, and it was the sweetest thing on earth. But that was my first kind of like creation of a cocktail, and it felt just so good to do, and so I was so creative. And at the time, I was swamped with coursework, and I was just.
I was just going to ask you, how did this affect your studies?
I mean, I was enjoying work, like doing the architecture stuff as well. But I think it just like became quite apparent to me that bars were more for me, and just through like bits of work experience, and I ended up making coffees for people and in offices rather than actually like being creative like my course had taught me to. And I just thought, like, this is just not what it was made out to me to be. You're not creative at all. You're within the confines of, you know, a box of what some builder says you have to do. So I guess I just longed for that creativity, and I just found that naturally through bars.
Did you ever think, both of you, that, oh wait, this is something where I could have a true career? And
I think for me, I always did, but I think that's lent itself a lot from seeing what my parents have done. And they were amazing. They were always really supportive of me not going to university, and I think they've always been really understanding that you can make a career out of hospitality. Whereas I know I was the only person from my sixth form I remember to not go to university. And it was a really, really big adjustment at 18. And it was hard to explain to my friends what I was doing. I guess it's never really been something that, as an 18-year-old, you could never say to your teacher, like, oh, I'm going to pursue a career in bars. Like, at the time, I never, ever knew, I guess you didn't either, dream of, would be in a position where we're 23 and 26 with a consultancy business and our own bottled cocktails. So I guess you can't perceive that as an 18-year-old, but like, I think I always knew that my career would be in hospitality, I think. Especially
maybe because you're outside of London as well.
Yeah.
Because here, even just, I mean, you're not so far away from 18, that here things were happening. And probably there were brand ambassadors here that you might not have met and saw even 5 years ago, oh, wait, that could potentially be what I have. But because you're in the countryside, you know, it's not, or in the city that's outside of London, it may not be, there's that possibility. I mean, did you think, was your family like, oh my God, he's not going to be an architect now?
Yeah, I remember going back and sort of telling them that I was going to not pursue my course, and I wasn't going to stay for the full 7 years and do that, and I was going to just kind of work in bars and be a bartender. And I remember I was so scared. I went back and it took me like 4 hours to tell them, and I was just about to leave, and I was like, right, I'm going to go. I'll see you later. And I got up and I started to walk towards the door, and I just said, like, I need to tell them. And I just turned around and I said to them, like, look, I'm really sorry. I know that, because my mum had been such a big help. She'd done all my paperwork, and she'd helped me get like finance through the government and stuff, and she'd gone to all this trouble. And I just said, I'm really sorry. Like, it's not my passion. I don't want to do this anymore. And like, they both just kind of looked at each other and looked at me, and they were like, well, if it's not what you want to do, then like, it's not what you want to do. Like, don't worry about it.
That must have been such a relief. Yeah,
but I just thought that I had it in my head, I think, that they were going to be really disappointed in me if I didn't pursue it. And actually, I think that they were relieved when I told them, because I think they knew that I wasn't happy. And I guess I just won like a big national competition and been taken to the States by Buffalo Trace, and it was just like the most.
I love
fun
how you
I'd
just
ever had.
glided over that. We're going to go back to that in a second.
Well,
All right.
You know, I was working in a bar in Nottingham, and I had this competition that I did. I won. It was my first big competition, and they flew me over to the States, and I'd never been stateside before, so it was just like, you know, I remember those like big novelty checks.
Yes.
It was like one of those, but an airline ticket, and they brought it out, and I was like,
"You're going to Kentucky."
I was so just like scared, but like excited, and there was just all these overwhelming feelings. And I think that trip, that connection with industry, and I met Hamish from Class Bar Mag there. I met so many other influencers and so many like people in the industry on that trip. And I think at that moment I was just like, okay, that maybe there's more to this industry than just being in a bar in Leicester making some drinks.
Well, back to the first competition.
Yeah.
When you thought, I'm gonna, and then we'll get to your competitions in a sec. When I'm gonna enter this, I guess Buffalo Trace competition. Yeah. Did you feel that all of a sudden you were that first job doing that research on that first, strawberry daiquiri?
Yeah, I mean,
how did you approach it for the first time?
So I'd done a few like local competitions before, and I was winning quite a few. So it gave me like a real confidence boost, and that was in Leicester. And then I moved to Nottingham, and I hadn't really done any competitions because I'd moved cities, and I'd moved to a bar that was well above my skill level, and for 6 months I'd just like hunkered down, was grafting through, just like trying to catch up and learn and being as good as the other bartenders. And this competition came around, and it looked like something that I would be interested in. I really like Buffalo Trace as a liquid. I think it's delicious. And I just kind of tried to create a drink that was representative of my style and my background, but also kind of pushing the boundaries of what I thought drinking was. So, I mean...
Well, what did you think drinking was?
Well, like at the time, there wasn't many bars in the Midlands doing like the stuff that we do now in London with rotary evaporators and infusions and sous vides and all these wonderful machines. And the bar that I was working in had this equipment, so it was really... it was weird because they were quite controlling over the equipment. They wouldn't let you use it, and you had to be a certain level in the bar team to be allowed into the back of house area. It was super weird, but because I'd worked so hard, I'd been allowed to progress up through the bar team into this position where I could then go and do the prep and learn the equipment. So I'd made a hay syrup, and at the time I thought it was like groundbreaking. I'd infused hay into water and then had turned it into a syrup, and it was like grassy and woody and oaky and delicious. And I made like a New York sour with hay syrup, and instead of red wine, I just put a vermouth float on it, and I served it in a martini glass, and it was dusted with chocolate and garnished with a feather. And I'd linked it all to this like love story between Daniel Boone, who was the founder of Leestown in...
You really did your American history research.
I just kind of like really got into it, and I really liked that part of like bringing creative stories and like linking them to brands, even if the stories aren't true. I mean, this story wasn't true. It was about a love note that went down a river, but it wasn't true. But I think it was just like more for me. It was just about that creative process and being like fun with the drinks. And I remember I did my competition. I was so nervous. I dropped my spoon, and I served the drink. It was on a plank of wood with like a bell jar with hay burning under it, and I put the bell jar over it, stopped the flames, and created smoke. And then I lifted it up, and it was like smoky all around the room, and everyone was like, "Oh my god!" And I left the bar thinking like, I've screwed this up. I've not won. And I sat there and I got really drunk.
All because you dropped a spoon? You thought you didn't win?
I got really, really hammered. I just sat there. I must have had like 10 beers whilst this competition was going on. And I remember I sat at the bar, head down, they were announcing the winners. They got third place up, second place up, and they said the winner served his drink on a board, and I was the only person to serve.
You were like, who did the other board?
Yeah, what? And I could almost cry when they brought me up. And
so you had that under your belt when you told your family, okay, architecture's not really for me. So they had actually seen you create something and win.
Yeah, but I think that even now, like, even after other competitions and various other accomplishments, I think now they still struggle a little bit to understand the industry for what it is, rather than just like someone pouring pints.
Yeah.
And I think that's just their disconnection with hospitality, because they don't really go out that much. We've got quite a big family. They've got like a lot of kids, so I don't think that they truly understand like the cocktail industry as much as perhaps Eleanor's parents do. But they're still super understanding and supportive. But I think, you know, perhaps when we open our own place, I think they might understand a little bit more.
But you have product, but we'll talk about that in a second. Now, Eleanor, when did you start realizing that you had this art for crafting new cocktails?
I still don't really think there's been an actual like solid moment for me where I'm like, I think my creative process is just, I think, ongoing. Like, I remember being in the Midlands, and it's actually how me and Charles met, was through a competition. I mean, I won, but no, it was.
Well, why did you start even competing?
So this was, I think, for me, competitions were always something I just was never really, really into, and it was something that I just didn't have probably the confidence for. I think, purely from working, I think, in a bar, and then I always felt a little bit on the back foot because I worked for my dad, and I was never sure. I got promoted up to bar manager there, and I think there was always quite a bit of, not animosity. Everybody there was really, really lovely, but it was just, there was never the validation for me. I don't think that like I'd earned the job from being good. It was just kind of a progression that
I guess you had to prove yourself even more to the people who work there. Yeah.
But yeah, we did a sales competition, so it wasn't, I didn't have to go up and present a drink in front of a room full of people, which at the time I was only like 19, no, how old would I have been?
20,
yeah. And the idea just like terrified me. So we did a sales competition with it was with Hudson Whiskey, actually, wasn't it? And that was the same thing. I think I saw that the prize was a trip to New York, and I'd been before and I fell in love with New York. It was, at the time, it was somewhere where I considered moving to, and I loved the city. So we started off this sales competition in the bar, and the bar that Charles was working in Nottingham, he was managing as well. They had started doing the same competition, and we had our rep for the area was brilliant, and he kind of kept like batting us against each other in terms of like, Charles' bar was one bottle ahead of us, so we'd like order in like 10 cases and make sure they didn't win.
I mean, strangely, he would tell them the volumes that we were doing, but not us the volumes that they were doing. So
get him in trouble.
we sat and we had a meeting with him, and he said, like, you know, with your volumes, we were doing tons of bottles. He said, with your volumes, you'll crush this competition and you'll definitely go to New York. So then, when Eleanor's bar came out on top, I mean, I remember the day of
what a great salesman.
The end of the competition. We kind of, I was like, oh yeah, sweet, like I've got this in the bag, don't need to worry about it. And he sent me through an email like saying, thanks for all your efforts, but you didn't win. And I was like, who the hell has beat us? Like, there's no one.
Had you met before?
We kind of knew of each other and briefly met, I think, just from like popping into bars or like being around the industry together in the Midlands at like training sessions and stuff. And then we properly met when I found out we'd won, and I went into his bar purely to gloat. And we'd been on a day out in Nottingham with our rep all day. We'd all had quite a lot to drink, and Charles's bar was the last stop. And yeah, I remember all sitting there, and Charles like knew who we were and came over and like made a point of telling us about his menu and stuff like that, and
because you had something to prove, obviously,
and
right?
being very nice and comping your
very
bill.
hospitable. But yeah, I think I just had a few drinks and took it upon myself to just gloat a bit at him, because we were this tiny little pub in the countryside, and the bar Charles was managing at the time was probably one of the best venues in the Midlands.
See, she's still gloating.
I'm still gloating. I'm not over it. But yeah, I think that was maybe the first time that I thought, oh, like, this is, again, the same, I think, with you, like, these trips that brands put on, I think it really, for people outside of London especially, I think, I mean, I've never grown up in London, so I don't know that side of it, but I think it just kind of really shows that it is a really exciting career to have. Like, you can travel the world. Like, even since we've been doing the consultancy, we've travelled all over the place, and it's been amazing. So yeah, I think that was when we realised that we'd like won that sales competition, and we'd beat bars like the Duck and Waffle and places that you were really had on this pedestal, and it was just like really exciting. And then yeah, I think moving to London not long after that, and then starting to work in award-winning venues, I think I was just getting like even more surrounded by creative processes. And
so you all got together relatively soon after that?
Well, actually, the first time we kind of met, we were both in relationships, and I think Eleanor's...
We don't have to get too intimate here.
No.
Just trying to bring you both together.
No, yeah, sure.
I don't
really want to mention that.
But yeah, I kind of... a few months later, I think Eleanor had liked one of my photos on Instagram or something, and I just dropped her a message and said,
the
like,
matchmaker.
Slid into the DMs.
Yeah.
So when did you both, did you both decide to move to London together?
Yeah, so we'd met, we'd like kind of started speaking again, and we decided to meet up, and I think we both from day one realised that we just had the same passion, and it was with bars and drinks, and we'd go on a date and we'd just be talking about like bars and stuff the whole time, and we realised it was this real like connection that we had, and I'd done some travelling before. I think you hadn't had you, and you were quite eager. We were like keen to see a bit of Asia and see a lot more of like different cultures before I think we decided to actually move somewhere together.
And bearing in mind that we'd only been dating a few weeks at this point, I think we just knew from the beginning, like without meaning to sound soppy, I just knew that like I didn't want to be with anyone else, and
It's Valentine's Day, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This may not be produced on Valentine's Day, but everyone should know that. So yay!
So I just, I guess I sort of was becoming a little unhappy and a little cold-footed in my job. I just wanted to do something else. I was getting like a little bit bored, and I said to Eleanor, I said, if I'd quit my job and just like throw in the towel, would you come travelling with me? And she said, yeah.
It was actually 2 or 3 years ago today.
Yeah.
So how long did you travel, and where did you go?
So we came down to London. So we came to London for Valentine's.
Yeah.
When we'd first met, and Charles had checked in on Facebook. We were at Peg and Patriot, and Matt, who owned it at the time, was messaged Charles back on Facebook and said, "Oh, do you want to come for a chat?" And so we were kind of like set on going travelling, and then we met up. Well, you met with Matt for a chat, didn't you? And Matt offered Charles a job at Scout, which was opening, and we both kind of were sat in St Pancras Station, weren't we, about to head home, and we just decided, we were like, oh no, we both wanted to move to London eventually anyway. So I think we both just took that as our kind of opportunity to come down and move. And
it was something that we'd spoken in lengths about before, about moving to London and making a career down here, and maybe even eventually opening a bar here, but I just never imagined that it would come so soon and off of someone else's back as well. I thought it would be me chasing people for jobs, and I think I didn't realise perhaps to what extent Matt was known in the industry, and I went and met this guy that I'd never really spoken to much before, and we chatted, and I just really liked the sound of the bar and the things that he was pushing, like sustainability and local foraged ingredients, etc., etc. And so, yeah, I just said to Eleanor, like, okay, so you kind of accepted my proposition to go travelling. Like, how would you feel about moving to London with me?
Travelling to London.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
we moved in not long after that, did we?
Mm-hmm.
So.
God, it was like days after, wasn't it? We had to come and find a flat. Yeah, everything moved just really quickly, but, you know, I think we both knew that it was the right thing to do. And we moved down to London into a horrible, horrible apartment. It was gross. But it got us
at the
here.
time, we thought it was amazing because it was just, we were living in London, we were living right next to King's Cross, and we were like, wow, this is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
a couple of months in, we realised it was horrible and we had to leave. But
It was underneath a chicken shop, and you'd hear the rats running across
Oh,
the street.
yeah, right, okay, we can.
not pretty.
It wasn't nice, was it?
Let's talk about the nice stuff. So you're at Scout and doing the Scouty thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when did you think, or what was the progression to really starting Liquid Intellect? You know, were you obviously you were creating cocktails, but they were cocktails for Scout, right?
Yeah, sure.
How did that progress to you doing cocktails for, you know, privately and
So
for other businesses?
interestingly, we'll go back to the Buffalo Trace competition. Now, on the way home from that trip, I sat next to Stephen Kersley, the master distiller of Lone Wolf, and he was telling me about this project that he was going to do in the next coming years. And I said, oh, it sounds great. And he said, you know, like, he'd watched the competition, and he said, would you be interested in doing like the perfect serves for the gin and stuff? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, this was like years before. And I just kind of thought nothing of it, and I'd moved to London. I'd started working at Scout. Eleanor had started working over at Nightjar, and so I got a message one day from this guy saying, hey, like, do you remember me from the plane, like, years ago? Just done the first kind of distillation of our gin. Do you want to come and try it? Like, come to Aberdeen and try it. So I went up to Aberdeen, tried the gin, had a really nice couple of days in Scotland, came back down, and the MD of the company got in touch with me and said, would you be interested in writing some perfect serves for it and doing some stuff? So Eleanor and I wrote the drinks for that, and that's kind of how everything started, really. And that first job, I guess, was it was our first kind of consultancy that we'd done. So we didn't have a website, we didn't have an online database, we didn't know how to invoice, we didn't really know how everything was working and kind of what we were doing, whether we were just going to be, you know, two people doing some drinks or. And Liquid Intellect had always been my Instagram name, and it just kind of seemed to really kind of fit the style of drinks that we were going to be putting together. So I think that just was kind of how it evolved, and it was clear to both of us from meeting that we were going to do something together. So, you know, the consultancy, the bottle cocktails, when we open a bar, it will both be. Or it will all be together.
So more and more people started to ask you.
Yeah, I think it was. We'd done little bits kind of separately, like as favours for friends or people asked for help with writing menus, or we'd always been kind of involved in stuff like that, hadn't we?
Yeah.
Really, like just before moving, and then when we moved, and then I think Lone Wolf was the first, like, I guess, like, job that Liquid Intellect did, and then from there we just kind of learn a little bit more each time we worked with other people. Like, we've had, like, we've made mistakes along the way, like, we've learned so much along the way, like, we had no idea how to set up a business, and we had to do it so quickly, and just learn all that by doing it ourselves, really.
And how long do you think it took you before you're like, okay, I got this whole business thing, we are now are
even
still
today,
a work in progress.
A big like with the consultancy, I think it was pretty simple with, like, invoicing, and then we got into the swing of that quite quickly, I think, and, like, delivering a good service to people, and we could tell that from having, like, repeat work and stuff. So I think we got into that quite quickly. I think it was really, really a big test of how to set up a business and stuff, when we decided to do the bottled cocktails, that was a lot more of we had to get like an AWRS license, which we had no idea what it was.
Well, so hold on before we get into the bottled cocktails. So you're busy doing these the perfect serves and the menus. What was kind of the lightning bolt moment for, hey, we should be doing a product, we should do bottled cocktails?
So we got contacted by a big supermarket in 2017.
Yeah.
The back end of that year, and they already had a couple of like cocktails in bottle that they did, and they were looking for some kind of more interesting flavors to release for 2018 Christmas. So they brought us on board as consultants to develop some recipes for them, and we started creating some drinks which could be bottled, and starting to think about that more of, because when we're thinking about drinks for bars, it was, people are making them on the spot, whereas something in bottle, there's a lot more that goes into like keeping it and stuff like that. So we started to work with that idea. We'd created 6 recipes for them, hadn't we? And then we saw them get released kind of like autumn last year, and they just got so much attention, and everyone was buying them. Like, they were flying off the shelves.
They sold out within like 3 days, didn't they?
It was crazy. Yeah. And
you're like, wait a
we
sec.
were looking at it, and we were just like, we can do that, but under our own name. I think like we can be getting the benefit of doing that. So I think it was just a natural progression.
And I think as well for them, we had to be very conscious of not using techniques that might be a little bit too out there. So, we weren't redistilling, for example, donuts into gin or
chicken dumplings.
As
you've been known to do.
So I think, for them, we had to be very, creating cocktails that were easy to bottle and easy to do.
And easy for people to understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When they're buying them.
I think when we decided, I think we should do this for ourselves, and it was an ongoing conversation for a long time about how we were going to do it, the sort of products that we were going to be putting out, the standard of products, and how they were going to be delivered, the packaging, the bottles, were they going to be ready to drink, were they going to require a process, we had so many meetings, so many discussions about how we were going to develop these recipes. And I think in the end, it just came down to being fun and just just letting ourselves just not stress about it and do flavors that, I could smash like 10 Jam Doughunuts as a kid.
So was that your first flavor that you thought of for yourselves?
Jam Doughnut was the first, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that was the first one. Followed very closely by cookie dough, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Excuse the ignorance for an American.
Okay.
Jam donut, I assume that is, and the assumption could be wrong, raspberry inside.
Exactly.
Okay, just check.
Strawberry.
Oh, strawberry. Again,
Yeah.
you harch
Strawberry
back to your
donuts, yeah.
strawberry. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the first, daiquiri.
The first one, yeah.
Hey, it's going to be strawberry.
So I think...
strawberry.
I think we just were very keen on delivering, because working both on consultancy and doing more interesting drinks, like you mentioned the chicken dumpling martini, that gets us fired up, that keeps us excited, it keeps us pushing and keeps us being innovative. But I think when you put that into a supermarket, people would just be like, that's gross. I don't think there'd be
many sales on it.
Yeah. They were always created, weren't they, with really our parents in mind, like that kind of like they're not like you're saying, like my mum doesn't drink cocktails at all. Like, she's been involved in hospitality, but she just doesn't drink spirits or cocktails. So I think their aim was to create something which even someone who didn't really drink cocktails or didn't maybe know what a cocktail was could pick it up off the shelf and drink it at home.
So people know what a jam donut is.
Yeah.
Right. So
and people know what a Negroni is. So it's kind of we picked the cocktails that we were going to bottle very carefully, alongside flavours that would work well with that classic, and also flavours that would work very well on their own as a product. So we were very keen to create a cocktail that had a very recognizable name that people could understand the flavor of just from reading the 4 words on the front of the bottle.
So what are the 4 words of the Jam Doughnut one?
Jam Doughnut Negroni.
Okay.
Well, 3 words.
3 words.
Cookie dough old fashioned for the cookie dough. Pina colada punch, and we have a banana bread Manhattan as well, which is
oh my god, they all sound so
delicious. Yeah. So I think when, like I said, we were just kind of just trying to get those flavors to be understood by just reading the words. Like very, very simple, very, very easy to understand, and that's kind of what drove our kind of bottled cocktail vision forward, was just creating something that was just easy to understand, simple but delicious, and giving people an introduction as to what style of drinks that we do. So we're still using the centrifuge, we're still using our rotary evaporator, we're still doing all the molecular stuff, but we're doing it in a more accessible way, I guess. So yeah.
So I think that it's time that I have to try the cookie dough old fashioned.
Yeah.
Can we go open a bottle?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thanks so much to Charles and Eleanor for meeting me at Hercules, the bar in Soho where you can find their bottled cocktails and try all of their fabulous creations. As it was Valentine's Day when we met, I asked them to give me a pinkish cocktail to remember the day by. They didn't disappoint, and now it's time for our cocktail of the week. Don't scream when you hear this recipe. It's almost impossible to make at home unless you have the correct machinery, which some of you might have. It has a cheeky name, and here are Charles and Eleanor to describe it.
Boys to the Yard is probably the biggest seller at Hercules. It's essentially a strawberry G&T.
Again, strawberries!
Yeah, I know, like crazy. Strawberries are delicious. I don't know why people don't put them in drinks more. They're fantastic. But we, I guess with that one, it was delivering, relating back to the bottles as well. Everything that we're doing now is more aimed at giving guests a simple experience that they can digest very easily. But if they want to know the complex background to each drink, they can. We don't force that on them. We don't tell them that it's distilled and centrifuged. We deliver a drink that's delicious, and they can drink it and leave, or they can drink it and have 5 more. But they don't have to be involved with the process, but they can be. So that one, the name inspired by the song, My Milkshake Brings All the Boys to the Yard.
I love that little jig you did.
Yeah. So
you kind of have to. I think anyone reciting that song has the
exactly.
involuntary jiggle. Yes.
So yeah, I guess we were looking at strawberry milkshake, the flavors of strawberry milkshake, and just converting that into a fizzy, uplifting, summery, fresh drink. And it was one of those drinks that we'd have probably taken off for the winter menu and replaced it with something a bit more like clementine, or something a bit more savoury, or something a bit more wintry. But it was one of those drinks that was just in such high demand, we just couldn't remove it, so it stayed on the menu all year and probably will never come off the menu.
So what do you do to the strawberry?
Well, so the strawberry, so we use Tanqueray gin as the base. We distill the strawberry in the rotary evaporator, so it's essentially making a strawberry water. So we blend the strawberries up and put them in the still, and we distill all of the liquid out of the strawberry pulp, and you leave behind all of that mush. The mush is then put into the centrifuge, and we make the garnish out of the waste. And then we also put strawberry juice in the centrifuge, and we centrifuge it so it still has the texture and the colour of strawberry juice, but you can see through it. It's still red. It's quite difficult to describe on a podcast, I guess. But we then make that into a shrub with some vinegar and some sugar, and then we age tonic water in cedarwood, which just gives I'm going to say a pencil shavings aroma, which sounds like something like a sommelier would say, but it just kind of really complements the strawberry very well, and it's very subtle, but it's really, really tasty. And then it's all blended together and carbonated, and we just serve it from a bottle. Very, very simple, yeah.
So, the Boys to the Yard is our cocktail of the week. There are only 4 ingredients. The first is easy. 50 ml of Tanqueray 10. Then 10 ml of homemade strawberry shrub, 100 ml of homemade cedar and strawberry tonic, and finally 0.01 gram of E202 potassium sorbate. For the strawberry shrub, blend the strawberries with a Pectinex, which is an enzyme that breaks down pectin, at 50 degrees for 10 minutes. Transfer to a centrifuge and spin for 30 minutes at 4,000 RPM. Combine the clarified strawberry juice with apple cider vinegar and sugar at a ratio of 3 to 1 to 2. For the cedar and strawberry tonic, blend the strawberries with Pectinex at 50 degrees for 10 minutes. Then transfer to a distillation flask and distill at 40 degrees until all the liquid has distilled to the collection flask. Whilst the strawberry juice is distilling, add 1 liter of tonic water to the ultrasonic homogenizer with a burnt stave of cedar wood. Blast on full power for 10 minutes. Once infused, combine the cedar wood tonic with the distilled strawberry juice in a ratio of 1 to 1. Then add the potassium sorbate. I know, it's only a bit of fun, and it's the reason to come on down to Hercules at 7 Greek Street in London. If this was way too much to comprehend, you know you'll find this recipe and all the cocktails of the week at alushlifemanual.com, where you'll also find all the ingredients in our shop. Next time we head down south to Kentucky to do some urban bourbon trailing, even visiting the bar that is rumored to have invented the old-fashioned. Before running off to try some, remember to head to alushlifemanual.com/merch for all your Lush Life gifts. Until next time, bottoms up. Thanks for listening to the Lush Life podcast. For more information and links to everything you've heard, plus a whole lot more, please visit alushlifemanual.com. Always remember the wise words of Oscar Wilde. All things in moderation, including moderation. And always drink responsibly. Okay, I said that last part. Theme music is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. Lush Life is produced by Terra. And I'm your drinking partner, Susan Schwartz. I'll see you at the bar.